Yeah. Mark Linford Hershey from Paradise, Pennsylvania.
Okay, I'm Jeanie, and I was born a number of years ago in Glendive, Montana.
I was born on a farm in Paradise Township in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which is in the southeast part of the state, not too far from Philadelphia. 5 sisters, 2 brothers, and we raised 2 other children from little up there. The girl that came, Ellen, was her mother or father, I forget which it was, passed away, and the one couldn't take care of him. The other one, it was his dad that died, so he came. His name was Lester, and they stayed with us, both of them, pretty much till they got married. I know Ellie did, and I think Lester probably did too. They worked on the farm, so there was 8 of us children in the family plus those 2. And then we did have a third one that came for a short time. But we had a decent sized farm for Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which was only about 130 acres, but that was 80 years ago when I was born. And so the farming was done pretty much by horses, by milking by hand and those things like that. So it's a little different today now, what one person can do and what 5 or 10 did then. After we did milk the cow, we milked by hand. We came in and all the kids, we all sat around the radio and listened to the radio. We had like Sergeant Preston and Yukon King and Green Hornet and Shadow and different programs we listened to.
I remember that sometimes the folks would go away and give us chores to do while they were gone, and then we'd just play. But then when we'd think it was about time for them to come home, we'd really hit the fan working hard and get it all caught up.
A lot. It's silly when you think of some of the things we used to play, like Mother May I and things like that. We would play out in our yard, and Mom and Dad would sit up in the porch and watch us, and we'd have a lot of fun. We played baseball. We played a lot of things together. So I don't recall we had funny nicknames for everybody for some reason. Like Ken was Big Shot. Well, Jean was the oldest, and we always called her Thin Skin. And then Ken was next, and he was Big Shot. Then Ethel was next, and she was Butts. And then I was next, and I was Eenie. And then, let's see, Janet was Toots. Bob was Butch, which was pretty normal, I guess. Let's see, what was Velda? Forget some of the names, but I don't know, we used those names a lot.
You know, my mom was basically a stay-at-home person, but there's an aspect to her life that's really amazing. She and Dad opened up a Christian bookstore in Albany, and they had a very successful bookstore. And so to think of Mom running that and doing all the ordering and all the setting up gives me a whole different picture than at any other time in her life. Yeah. And I loved working in there. I did that from when I was, early teens probably. And if I wasn't busy, I could sit and read books. I loved to read.
I remember one thing that was so interesting. I was a good diver, and Dad used to, every time an aunt or uncle or somebody would come, if we're in the house, Dad said, "Oh, come on, watch Lynn dive." And so I'd drive out to the swimming pool, and I'd have to put on a diving exhibition. I was very good at
fancy dives?
Yeah, swan dive and jackknife was my specialty.
By 8th grade, I believed that I was going to be a nurse. I felt like God called me to be a nurse and maybe go on the mission field.
I left home because I had 2 brothers on the farm. And this was back during the days when draft was still in operation, draft for the military. And so I kind of volunteered to go into service so that the 2 brothers would be able to stay home on the farm. and they weren't interested. My older brother Ken wasn't interested in going into service, and I went into what the Mennonite Church had called voluntary service, and the military called it selective service. And they would, I could choose to go in a service, alternative service, like working in a hospital or something like that, and it was counted as service toward the country.
And how old were you when you did that?
I was probably, let's see, I don't remember for sure. I was probably not much, I'd have to check it, about 19, I guess.
Okay.
Then when I went to, I had to take a physical with the military, just like the military guys going into military. But I had broken my arm ice skating, showing off. I was skated out to do a twirl, and I fell and broke my arm. And I didn't even think about it. I had a cast on. I had made arrangements with the Mennonite Central Committee to go into voluntary service, but I had to have my physical. And when I went to get the physical, which we went to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they said, well, they can't give me a physical with a broken arm. I said, they just can't do it. So they just sent me home without a physical. But I already had arrangements to go into service, voluntary service. And so I went ahead and went into service, and I guess I didn't really do anything about it until it was, my 2 years was up. Then Hershey, General Hershey was head of selective service at that time. So I had to write to him to get a release, and he released me. I don't know if it was the name or what, but anyway. But in service, I went first to California and worked in a mental hospital. It's called Kingsview Home, a mental hospital operated by the Mennonite Church. And I worked there for a year, then transferred and went to Denver and helped there. They were starting a new voluntary service unit. So I went to Denver. And in California, I worked first went actually to work in the laundry. Then when I got there, as I recall, the laundry was closed and they sent things out. So I worked on the farm for a short time. They had a farm to supply a lot of their own food. But I was only out there, I don't know how many months, and they asked if I would work inside, which in an orderly on the psych ward. So I did that. And that was a very challenging and a very interesting experience working there.
I bet.
And then transferred to Denver, and when I went to Denver, then I helped build a VS unit, but I worked in the General Hospital, Denver General, which was a large hospital. Oh, also in California, I'm kind of jumping around here, but in California, I drove ambulance also.
Oh.
And that was an interesting experience. In those days, an ambulance was a big fancy Cadillac, really fancy looking thing.
So I went on to Lahana Mennonite School of Nursing right out of, well, first of all, I had to go for a year of pre-nursing at Heston College. And then from there I went to Lahana and became a nurse.
Jeanie and I met when I was in Denver, and she was in Denver in nurses training. She took her training at La Junta, which is a small town south of Denver, but it was a small Mennonite hospital, and they had to use other hospitals to get parts of their training. And she was training in Denver, and that's when we got acquainted. And
I met Lynn in Denver, Colorado. And I suppose you didn't want to know this part of the story, that in high school I had been with a boy named Wayne, and he's the one that drowned in the drowning accident. And then later I met and went with a guy named Verl. And we became engaged when we were just before we went to college.
the way we got acquainted was that the church we went to, a number of the guys from the VS unit, Voluntary Service Unit, were going to go sing at the rescue mission. And the pastor of the Mennonite church there, Bud Bishop, called and said some new student nurses called and wanted to go to the rescue mission to sing, but they needed a way down and wanted to know if we would pick them up. Well, so the guys were going to do that, but I wasn't able to because I had to work that night, so I didn't go along. But this is something that was never could figure out exactly why or how it happened. But when they came home, the guy's name was Wilmer. Wilmer Wadle was one of the guys that took him down. And I was sleeping when they came home, because I'd worked that evening. He woke me up. It was at the morning, I forget just when it was. He said, Lynn, he says, I met a girl, and when you two meet each other, you're going to really fall for each other. And that was Jeanie. And why he said that or what made him think it, we never did find out.
One evening, there was 3 of us there together, 3 friends, and we'd been asked to go to the rescue mission to sing, but we needed someone to take us, so there was 3 VSers that came and picked up we 3 girls to go sing at the rescue mission. And then they found out that we were hoping to go to Colorado Springs the next day to see the one girl's aunt and uncle. We wanted to get out of the city. And these guys said, well, we have somebody we know that's going to Rocky Mountain Camp, so I'm sure they'd take you to Colorado Springs. So we were gang enough to go that we said, okay.
Us 3 of us guys were going to go down and climb climb Pikes Peak, and these student nurses wanted to go along, and so us 3 of us guys went to see those girls. And they were going to get off in Colorado Springs, and we were going to go up to the camp, which was another, 40-some miles away. But we talked them into going along up to the camp to hike Pikes Peak with us. Well, Jeanie had hurt her toe, her little toes, you know how they are, how they stand up?
Yeah.
She had hurt one of them, and she couldn't hike, so I hiked with the other kids, and we went up. But then on the way back, when we got back to camp and we're going to leave to go back to Denver, I opened the back door and 2 of the girls got in, Jeanie and I forget which one the other one was, and then I got in. But it was the 3 boys in front and the 3 girls in back, but I got in beside Jeanie. And we had a nice visit and talking and stuff, but I didn't realize that at that time that she was engaged.
I've got a funny little toe, and it got pulled back, so it was hurt. And so, but I still was determined to go to Colorado Springs. So I went with them anyway. Then the guy, so there was these 3 guys came, and one of them was Lynn. The 3 guys decided to talk us into forgetting about Colorado Springs and go to Rocky Mountain Camp with them and climb Pikes Peak the next day. Well, I knew I couldn't do that, so I stayed at Rocky Mountain Camp, and they all climbed Pikes Peak. So I was in the car that went to pick them up, and when we got in the car to drive back to Denver, Linford, so I didn't ever call him Linford at that time, I'm just calling him that for funny at this point. But he all of a sudden crowded into the back seat with us, so he talked with me, we got acquainted. Well, I was not flirting with him, but we did have fun talking, and then he didn't know I was engaged.
And so I said later on, I don't know how long it was, several days, I said something to one of the other girls about asking what she thought it would be okay if I asked Jeanie out on a date, and she said, well, didn't you know she was engaged? And I didn't, of course, didn't know that. So then, the interesting thing was that the guy she was engaged to, was in school I think maybe in Goshen. I'm not sure where he was at that time, or in med school, which it was. But anyway, he was going to come to Denver to see her. And the unit where I stayed, there was a lot of beds, number of beds, but the guys were all gone except me, and so I says, well, he could stay here. Well, I didn't realize at the time he was seeing Jeanie there, she was talking to him about breaking off the engagement.
Oh, no.
And he and I were in the same room.
I did a lot of soul searching through that time, I really did, because I had thought it was the right thing for me to do, to marry Burl. We were both going to be missionaries, and he was going to be a doctor, and I was going to be a nurse, so it looked like a wonderful workout. But later I began to look at it and realize that we didn't have much of a fun, easy relationship. It was kind of based on, you be a doctor, I'll be a nurse, and that kind of thing. And so I did a lot of seeking at that time to know what God's will really was for me. Was it to be with Verl or not? And I wrote home, and that was one time that Mom entered into my life and helped me to work through things and so forth. And I remember, I wish I still had it, but I remember the letter she sent and said, if you're going to marry someone, you need to have the kind of relationship that when you're in a group someplace, you look across the room and you catch each other's eye and you know that that person is special for you. And she gave me that kind of information. And I knew I didn't have that with Burl. So I decided to break off with him. So then later, I did start to date Lynn. But in him, I found that there was a different sense of relationship, and I could have a lot of fun with a person and so forth. So we had more of that kind of relationship with him. Oh, what was he like? How does one describe your grandpa? He had a real heart for service, for church involvement and so forth too. And he was in voluntary service at that time. But he had a real heart for service, so I didn't feel like I was going back on this thing about being a missionary. I knew we'd probably be at home and so forth. But we've then planned to go into voluntary service as a couple when we got married. We were married on April Fool's Day, and the reason being that I graduated from nurses training the evening before.
Nice.
And you couldn't get married in nurses training. And his parents came from Pennsylvania to Colorado, and mine came from Oregon to Colorado, so we had my graduation, and then we got married the next day.